Hi guys, Lonnie here from Fern. We've got some commonly asked questions today, some FAQs all about terrariums we'd like to answer for you. Often with horticulture, if you're new to it, don't worry, there's honestly no such thing as a stupid question. If this is totally new to you, completely understand all of the sort of questions you might have. So I want to go ahead now, think of some of the most common questions we get asked at workshops, and we're going to try and alleviate some of those for you now. So first of all, one of the questions we get asked a lot is, will the plants grow? The answer is, of course, yes. The plants inside of your terrarium are going to grow. In fact, commonly the plants that we use at Fern, Calathea, Fittonia, Ivy, they're going to be happier inside of a terrarium environment. Within a terrarium, you're promoting the sort of atmosphere that these plants normally live in, like in the rainforest. It's a nice humid environment. So come the spring and summer, you'll see quite a bit of growth with the plants, particularly the Calatheas that are inside, and the Fittonias as well are going to kick up quite a bit of growth. This, as I say, happens a lot more in the spring and summer, when plants do tend to grow more. In the winter, plants enter what we call dormancy. That means they start to slow down a little bit, reserve their resources, and generally slow down, but you will still see a little bit of growth. Secondly, do I need to water it? The answer is yes. There is a bit of maintenance involved with terrariums, but typically speaking, watering is a lot less frequent than it is with a regular house plant. So as you may well know with the terrarium, it is of course self-watering, meaning that all of the moisture inside rises up the glass and falls back down again. But because we use a cork seal, which allows air in, this means that some of the water will disperse. So occasionally you will need to water a terrarium. We've got a great video on all of the sort of tips and tricks that you'll need to know as to when to water it. But again, I want to stress the point, it's very important to avoid a routine with watering your terrariums. You'll notice essentially when the moisture inside of a terrarium begins to go, when it goes dry, that's when you need to water it, but this is relatively infrequent. Another question, am I going to need to repot my plants? Now, really, no, you shouldn't have to. The great thing about a terrarium is, this one in particular, we've got lots of space inside this terrarium for the plants to grow. So normally, when you find a plant, so let's take for instance a Calathea, like one we have up here. As you can see, the pot that it's in is pretty small. So this is quite a small pot, and then the compost that's inside of a terrarium, the size here is much larger. So that essentially means that the roots have much more room to grow, so they're going to be happy for a very long time. Another question, can I put the terrarium in my garden? This is a short one, and I'm afraid the answer is no. We want really to get the best conditions possible for our terrarium, and of course the term houseplant applies to tropical plants a lot of the time, and that's because we want to keep these plants inside of the house. They're going to thrive much better indoors than they would outdoors. The thing is, where these plants are native to, they're not used to the cold sort of climates that we get during the winter in England. And we want to leave a plant undisturbed. So a lot of the time people might ask me, can I keep this outside in the summer and bring it in the winter? A plant isn't going to get up and grow legs and walk around throughout the seasons. So of course you want to keep it in the same position so that it becomes accustomed to the environment that it's in seasonally. So I would say, unfortunately, no, you can't really keep your terrariums outside. Another question, question number 5. Can I put anything else inside of my terrarium, apart from, of course, the popular Calathea and Fittonia that we like to use here? The answer is yes. There's a multitude of other different plants that you can use, but ideally you want to steer towards something that likes tropical climates, okay? So something like a succulent isn't going to be very good inside of a terrarium. Now you might say like, oh, I've got a succulent terrarium. Strictly speaking, a terrarium is a sealed environment like this. You might find a succulent arrangement, but strictly speaking, that isn't a terrarium, okay? So you might see it open, doesn't have a lid, the air can still get to it, that's what a succulent wants. But if we put a succulent inside of here, much too much moisture for it, and that means that unfortunately it probably will rot. But just to name a few plants that will do really well inside of a terrarium, nice tropical ones, you could do a Hypoestes, you could do Pelea, you could do Peperomia, you could use Areca palms. There's a great multitude. And your best bet is if you go down to a plant shop, house plant shop that is, look for some of the smaller plants, preferably with less succulent leaves. So what I mean by that is the leaves are essentially less thick, less sort of juicy if you like. So nice fine leaves. Most of the time, these sorts of tropical plants, you can always have a go at putting them inside of a terrarium. Conversely with that, another question, can I take something from the garden and put that inside of a terrarium? I would avoid this because traditionally speaking, the sort of things that we're going to find native growing into our garden won't necessarily do as well inside of a terrarium. And if you've also got things you've initially put inside the terrarium, so some of these nice like plants you've decided to get from the house plant shop or from us at Terrarium Fern, you pop that inside, you've established your terrarium, and you take something else organic from a different environment, you could unfortunately cause a little bit of a bacterial imbalance, which could lead to some sort of rot inside of the terrarium. Even for instance, something like a bit of wood. You can always put wood inside of a terrarium. A lot of the time, you know, it's going to look really nice. You can grow things out of the wood, design a little tree inside, of course. But you may need to sort of sterilize it. A good way to do this is if you actually bake the wood. I think I have seen this done before. You obviously want to be careful baking a bit of wood inside of the oven. But if you try and get rid of all that old moisture that's come from the forest, as opposed to a nursery, that's going to avoid any sort of conflict. Just to give you an example, once a friend got me some beech wood, and I put this inside of a terrarium without washing it, doing anything to it, and unfortunately that caused a little bit of a fungal reaction, so we saw a little bit of rot inside of the terrarium. Question number 7, this is a really nice one. Can I put toys or figurines inside of my terrarium? Absolutely. But once again, do try and avoid something made of wood, and also do make sure you wash it, get it nice and sterile before you put it in. It is important. This is a sealed environment. We don't want to add anything after it's established that could lead to any sort of infection or imbalance, okay? So sometimes like a little bit of a Lego figure, maybe like little dinosaurs, people do that all the time. A lot of the plants that you have inside of here, they look really cool, nice vivid colours. People say like, oh, it looks kind of like a nice sort of prehistoric scene, like Jurassic Park, something like that within your terrarium. Absolutely, you can do that. And finally, how long will it live? Now, theoretically speaking, a terrarium can last indefinitely. As long as you maintain it, give it the right conditions, it can thrive, continue to grow and reproduce. The plants inside may well reproduce. Now, if you've come to one of our workshops at Terrarium Fern, something that we talk about a lot is a personal hero of ours, Mr. David Latimer, who of course made a terrarium with a plant called a spiderwort back in the early 60s. He's only watered it once and it's still alive today. So there you have it. There's a load of questions for you. If you do have any more queries, if there's something you're just not sure about, something you're curious about, please do feel free just to drop us a line or come along to one of our workshops. We'd love to chat to you. Thank you.